We're talking about sworn enemies, unlawful combatants of the United States, and attempting to learn whether they have information or are in plots that endanger the lives of hundreds or thousands of Americans. I am grateful that there's a government that takes these responsibilities seriously, that tries to stay on the human side of a wrenchingly difficult judgment call. I hope that none of us ever have to make that decision for ourselves. Thank you.
So what we'd like to do for the next few minutes is spur a bit of a back and forth between Professor Gilbert and Senator Mitchell. And one of the things that I was asked to do was just to sort of pose questions, very broadly speaking, that might spur conversation. And so I'll just pose one to start things off. Clearly you can see that there are a wide range of differences between Professor Gilbert and Senator Mitchell on the issue of what counts as torture, when did torture occur, although there is an agreement that at some point torture did happen at some extent. So there's a debate that will hopefully surface there as well. But what I hear is what might be perhaps most interesting to spur the discussion is something of an aporia that comes about when we hear at least what sounds to me like the gist of each of our presenters' arguments. Professor Gilbert makes a strong case for the defense of habeas corpus and the need to hold somebody somewhere accountable in defense of this fundamental principle. While on the other hand, many of Senator Mitchell's arguments also offer a strong argument talking about the complexities of a system in which these decisions are made and are even being continued on by a new administration or were perhaps condoned by other parts, which speaks perhaps to the difficulty of holding one person accountable for this. Which leads then perhaps to a question of why the particular figure of Condoleezza Rice in terms of holding her specifically accountable from both perspectives, right? What would be particularly problematic from the perspective of Senator Mitchell about holding Condoleezza Rice accountable, and why would this be a particularly good choice from the perspective of Senator Gilbert? And perhaps that could start the discussion.
I actually agree strongly with Senator Mitchell that Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld are the crucial culprits. And so the first thing I'd like to say is that part of his argument, or that thought, contradicts the thought that the CIA was very thoughtful, or that the discussions in the Oval Office are very thoughtful about this. Second point is the reason they had the principles discussion is that the CIA knew that what it was doing was against the law and against international law. They also kept Bush out of the meetings so that he would have deniability. These were meetings to discuss torture techniques. Yes, Senator Mitchell is completely right that they have admitted, Michael Hayden, the head of the Defense Intelligence, said they've waterboarded 3 people. Waterboarding is torture, as Eric Holder said. It has been regarded as torture since the Middle Ages. The special rapporteur on torture, the leading international lawyer in Germany, Manfred Novak, said the day Bush left office, he's no longer president, he must be indicted for the crime of torture. Condi presided at those meetings. I want the police state put out of business, including those Democrats who enabled it. One last point. Obama's discussion of rendition is different from extraordinary rendition. And what was described with Binyam Mohammed, or Meher Arar in the film, the Canadian-Syrian engineer who was picked up at LaGuardia on his way back to Canada and sent to a coffin-like cell in Syria begging officials not to send him because he would be tortured, is under the doctrine of command responsibility with which we tried the Nazi and Tokyo war criminals following World War II, absolutely the responsibility of every person who sat in the principals meeting. And the only one who has a case of the 6 people to get off is Colin Powell, who at least said, you know, the world thinks badly of us. We should think badly of us.
Well, I think one of the things that would be problematic from a conservative perspective on indicting Condoleezza Rice is that we all understand that the rage of half or something less than half of the country is directed at George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld. Condoleezza Rice was an advisor, played a role, but she would be a proxy victim at best. I guess we're discussing it because of this movie, but if you think, and the other point to make is that the decisions that they made were obviously much broader and more sweeping than how to interrogate a few high information potential suspects that she's being directly accused of. If those be war crimes, there should have been a bill of impeachment, it should have been debated, it should have been deliberated and voted on in the United States House and the United States Senate. If they be tough calls for an executive who sees his role as protecting American lives after 3,000 of them were snuffed out and the extent of the ongoing threat, one of the things that separates a constitutional republic from a banana republic is that the new team doesn't come in and shoot and imprison the old team. I would be troubled, frankly, by these processes being invoked against the highest leadership of the administration, but particularly against Condoleezza Rice, who was an advisor, not a principal.
Shawn is right that there's a tremendous difference between a banana republic and the rule of law. We have been the worst banana republic in the hemisphere. The problem in it is that the crimes run very deep and are very extensive. And so to deal with them in a serious way, and that was part of his point about the Democrats enabled at least some of this. Pelosi has now said there should be prosecutions. That's a first. If the law was broken, there should be prosecutions. But the fact is that the Democrats also enabled this. If we condone this, it will lead to a situation where torture and police state activities are what America is known for, and any president who chooses of either party to do this again can summon up the image of Bush as neoconservatives who are not conservative, summon up the image of FDR jailing Japanese Americans, and Lincoln, who was sort of the same party, suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War. Either we as a public will speak to this, or there will be grave consequences. The last point is, in Iraq, the CIA tortured this guy, al-Libi, who said whatever they wanted. It is not true, and by the way, Colin Powell gave the most embarrassing speech of his life in which he lied about a whole bunch of things based on al-Libi's, as Tenet put it, slam dunk information. These are not hard decisions to fight against 9/11. These are decisions which have wakened terrorists to fight against the United States, because if you treat people like we treated Binyan Mohammed, you know what? Imagine it this way. Which is the power who has sent people to various sites to be tortured in the way we described? Let's leave aside the question of whether the fingernails point is accurate or not. Amnesty International seems to think it is. Let's leave it aside. They haven't allowed the light in fully. They haven't told the truth. We don't know yet. There hasn't been an investigation, though their official, Susan Crawford, said that they had tortured Katani.